Recording. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my show, Number 9 Talk, with my guest, Steve Wraith. Just to go on top of what we've already covered. The sitting in 14th, won 5, drawn 2, lost 5, 17 points out of the 36. So yeah, it's not too bad. Could be better, but what's your take on the season so far, Steve?
Look, you've got to be happy with that, with the fact that Steve Bruce is still coaching the team. We did have a half decent transfer window this time. The shackles were slightly off, with Mike Ashley allowing purchases of a striker. Callum Wilson coming in was a godsend. I think we all agree that Ryan Fraser was a good acquisition. I think the jury is still out on Jamal Lewis, but look, we had some acquisitions. We didn't lose the key players that we wanted to keep a hold of. So the transfer window was good in that respect. And we are where we are. It's an interesting Premier League. A lot of the big teams seem to be struggling, with the exception of Liverpool and Tottenham. Arsenal currently below us in the table. And if you told us that coming up to Christmas we would be clear of the relegation positions by over 10 points, and that would be in the quarter final of the League Cup, I think everybody, and I mean everybody, would have snapped their hands off. So you've got to be happy. You've got to be happy to that respect. We're all keeping our fingers crossed, of course, that a takeover is going to be imminent, and that we're going to be going on to bigger and better things. But I think that's the way it is. I think Newcastle United fans will be happy with their lot at the moment. I know I certainly am.
Yeah. Looking at the other stats as well, 242 passes, completed 161. So that's a pass rate in that match of 66.5. It should be higher. I mean, we've talked about the midfield pairings quite a few times on both our shows, but I think we're still jogging about with it all. What would be your perfect pairing?
It's difficult. I think we're lacking a creative midfield player. The only one with any creativity within the squad is John Joe Shelvey. Anybody who watches NUFC Matters knows I'm not a huge Shelvey fan. However, that's all we've got at the moment. I found it strange to go to Leeds and to drop the players that Steve Bruce did. We're not obviously aware of what the COVID situation is within the club. We don't know who's had it. We don't know who maybe is suffering a little bit of fatigue. But I always live by the adage that anybody who's fit enough to be on the bench is fit enough to start. So I would have had Shelvey and Richie both playing last night, and Almiron. I find it strange that he decided to change a winning team. Just bizarre. But in the midfield, Matty Longstaff, we battled hard to keep a hold of him. We now refuse to play him for whatever reason. Sean Longstaff looks, as if he's suffering massively with confidence. He doesn't seem to be the player that we all thought he was at this moment in time. That's not to suggest that he couldn't still go on to become a good player. I just feel that some players benefit under Bruce's management and others don't. I would probably throw a curveball in. I think Matt Ritchie could do a job in the middle. I don't think he's got the legs to play wide as much as he did probably when he first came to the club. I would suggest even having him sit in front of the back four, Matt Ritchie, but maybe he's playing Shelvey alongside him. They're both old pros and old heads, and we need creativity, because without creativity you don't score goals, and you're left with what we saw last night, which was chances coming from set pieces or long hopeful balls forward. And we know that Joe Linton's game isn't getting the ball over the top. He's not a prolific scorer. He struggles with that. And Callum Wilson doesn't. Callum Wilson's a fox in the box. He's somebody who needs good service, and the goals that he scored have come from good crosses in by the likes of Fraser or Jacob Murphy or Hendrick. You need creativity. You need people to put the ball through. But yeah, I would probably go for maybe a Ritchie and Shelvey partnership. I don't mind Hayden, but Hayden clearly at the minute is still suffering from fatigue from COVID as well. I don't mind Hayden. I know Hayden's not a popular player amongst the fans, but he's certainly he certainly does put 100% in. He tends to do a lot of the dirty work. He does the midfield job that people don't tend to see. So, you tend to appreciate the players who score goals or make surgeon runs forward and slot the forward in for them to score. Hayden's not like that. He's quite a defensive midfielder, but I think a lot of them are suffering because of the tactics. I make no bones about it. Steve Bruce doesn't seem to have a plan B. Very rarely does he seem to have a plan A. It's quite concerning that at half time we tend to go in and we have a chat. There seems that they don't chat about tactics or what's gone on, mate. They don't seem to have a chat about maybe closing this one down or taking that one, and it just seems very disappointing. And I've said before, I feel like Steve Bruce is like a good man manager. I think he's one of the lads. He's been in the dressing room for years. I think he gets on with players, and I think you can see that the players certainly are still playing for him. But when it comes to a tactical change, I get the impression he's turning to maybe Steve Agnew and his coaching staff to say, well, what do we do here? What do we do? What do we do with this? What do we do then? They haven't got it right a lot of times. But look, we are where we are. We're sitting 14th in the league at the moment. We're in the quarterfinals of the cup. We would have all settled for that. And it's funny because we all tend to lead our lives on social media. We all refer to the NUFC hashtag to interact with supporters, even more so now during lockdown and COVID and tier 3s and tier 2s, etc. And a lot of us are spending more time on the internet, and I think there's a lot of opinions out there, and I think those opinions can fluctuate. And as I say, watching the game with fans, which has become part of the NUFC Matters community, for example, where we sit and do live watch-alongs, and we sometimes have away supporters on like we did last night. It shows you the emotions that we go through. Newcastle take the lead and then Leeds pull it back. So when I'm asking the questions to the guys, you can hear them. It's interesting to see how people's mindset changes. And then Leeds go 2-1 up, Newcastle go 2-2, and suddenly it's, yes, we've got a chance here. We want to bomb on. We want to get the third goal. Got to make the substitutions. The substitutions come on. You won't find anybody on the podcast from last night going, oh, don't agree with that. Yeah, we made the right decisions. It looked right. And then suddenly we're caught with a sucker punch. We're attacking. Leeds go down the other end and score. It's 3-2. Heads go down. 5-2 wasn't a fair reflection on the score, on the game. Sorry, but it just shows you. We're all the same. And I almost feel as if Steve Bruce is like that. If Steve Bruce is a Newcastle fan, I don't know whether he is. He's never said he is. He's from the area. He's proud of being from the area, and rightly so. But I don't know whether he's a Newcastle fan. But it's almost as if he manages as if he's a Newcastle fan. And it's he couldn't have done right. He couldn't have done right for doing wrong last night, Dom, because ultimately, had he picked a defensive substitute and brought a defensive substitute on, I guarantee that most of us on that podcast would have been groaning, going, oh, what's he doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. It's there for the taking. We can beat these. Instead, He brings on two attacking players, which worked against Crystal Palace, works against West Brom. But unfortunately, last night it didn't. We got caught out, and we got spanked by a Leeds team that's reminiscent to the old entertainers team from the 90s. They've tackled the Premier League in a similar fashion. They go for the jugular, and they've got players who can score goals. And credit to Leeds last night. Really, got to give them credit, mate. We got done in the last half an hour of that game, and fair play to them. But look, we're not in a bad position, Dom. I'm not gonna cry into me beer at the moment. And do I think Newcastle will stay up? I personally do. I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said that at the start of the season. I thought Newcastle would really struggle this year. Bruce never has a good second season. But it's strange times, mate. It's strange times.
Definitely strange times. Just on the back of the game there's Callum Wilson there, done pretty well. Was it 7 goals in 11 games? So he has been a revelation on the team. But last night, he did seem a bit tired, but at the same time, should he have gotten the penalty? Because, it has been a talking point. A couple of people said yes, it was a penalty. A couple of people said no. What was your take on the penalty show?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was. I mean, you saw a lot of the pundits as well, who tend to be very negative towards Newcastle on television these days, and they all said that was a penalty. But we seem to be going through a transition in the rules, if you like. VAR came in and it was supposed to simplify things, but what it's done is it's complicated things and it's made things more of an issue. That last night was a penalty, I thought, and that could have changed the way the game goes, but unfortunately we didn't get it. We've got to accept it. I think it's the old adage, isn't it? The managers come out where the balance is up throughout the season. And I think that's the kind of situation we find with that. But, the thing that annoys me, Dom, is it's the handball rule in the box. And we've seen some absolutely ludicrous penalties given for handball. It's clearly, not the ball playing the hand. It's not intentional. And you're almost going to have to start from junior football and work your way through teaching kids not to rise, jump up with your hands up like that. It's a natural reaction. If a ball is coming to you at 60, 70 mile an hour, you're not going to stand there and take it in the face and put your hands behind your back. You're going to put your hands up. So I don't know how on earth you get round it. I think the rule needs looking at. It needs changing. You're never going to get everything 100% right with VAR, etc. But ultimately, I think a simple penalty like that, and it was... Maybe we've got too many camera angles, Dom, because I watched it, back on replay after the game, and they showed numerous angles. They showed it again on Sky this morning, and the different angles. I think 7 of the angles that they showed of that penalty, I think one of them looked as if it was a potential good challenge, and he got the ball. The other 6 said penalty. So even in the land in a land of numbers like that, we should be saying, well, actually, it's a penalty. You know what I mean? But if it was, I don't know, if it was the other way, six angles say that it doesn't look like that, and one does, then it's clearly not a penalty. It's common sense, and I think there's a lack of common sense given. And the referee did balance it up last night. I think they could have had a penalty as well. But like I say, these things do tend to even out over a season. And Callum Wilson's been great. He's a breath of fresh air. It's the kind of player we love to have in a Newcastle shirt. It's a pity that he's not in the number 9 shirt for me. I think you could have taken that off Joe Linton, and I don't think he would have been too bothered. I think probably would have helped alleviate some of the pressure on him. But Callum Wilson is happy in the number that he plays in, and fair play to him. As for Joe Linton, look, the kid's getting better. I've been a huge critic of him on the show, and I made a promise to myself and to the watchers that we would essentially give him 10 games. I gave him 10 games. I laid it on thick after that because I thought he'd been absolutely diabolical. And then lo and behold, we've seen a different Joe Linton. Whether that's down to Steve Bruce coaching him differently or someone paying a bit more attention, whether it's down to Joe Linton finally grasping what life is like in the Premier League, I don't know. I really don't know what it is. But there's signs of life with Joe Linton. Will he ever be a £40 million player? No, he won't be. Is there signs of life, and can we get something out of him in the duration that he's going to be at the club? Yes, 100% we can.
Yeah. Just looking at our cup run recently. 1 against Rovers, 7-0 against Morecambe, 1-3-1 penalties, 5-4 against Newport. Brentford next, the return of Ivan Toney. That should be fun.
Ivan Toney, yeah, another one who was cast aside, deemed not good enough. Probably the right decision, I would say. Is he going to come back and haunt us? I would say not. We've had other players who've gone recently, and they haven't come back to do the damage. Players that tend to come back and do that are players who are playing at the higher level and do really well. I fancy Newcastle to get through this. I really do. I think Newcastle will get a semi-final slot this year. And it would be sod's law we get to Wembley and none of us can go. But it looks to me as if Newcastle maybe will be focusing on that as well. The players will have it in their minds. They'll want to get through a quarter final and get into a semi-final. From our perspective, it just keeps the season alive. We know we're not going to finish in the top echelons of the division. We hope we're going to steer clear of the relegation battle. At the moment, it seems fairly cut and dry. two of those places you could almost say will be filled by teams that came up. But from our position at the moment, we are very, we're in a very good position. It would need a monumental collapse by Steve Bruce and the lads to be even involved in the relegation battle. So I'm confident on that. But yeah, I think we can beat them. I'm not worried about Ivan Toney. He scores goals, yes. But I think we've got more than enough to beat them and progress to the semi-finals, mate.
Yep. I was also looking at the long stuff. Why isn't Matty getting more time? Because he's obviously fit, and he's a player that we need to see more of. To bring in to progress our youth players as well.
$1 million question, isn't it, mate? Why aren't the Longstaffs getting an equal opportunity, I suppose is the word. Sean's featured, didn't cover himself in glory against Leeds, but then not many people did. He got a lot of criticism on social media last night, which is often the case when we have a defeat. People tend to go for players, and Sean Longstaff got it in the neck last night. Jamal Lewis is another one. He seems to be a Boo Boys favourite at the moment. Matty Longstaff is a strange situation. I really don't understand why we made such a song and dance about keeping a hold of him, at the start of the season. And, there was a relief. It was almost like the signing of a new player, and this kid's talented and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And then, he struggled at times to even get in the match day squad, which is absolutely bizarre. There's clearly something gone on. There's clearly something not right with him and Steve Bruce, whether it's in training. Maybe he's not achieving the standards that Steve Bruce sets. Maybe he's not fit enough. Has he had COVID, of course, in these recent times? So is he another one who, we all think that, there's something going on when, unfortunately, he's been one of the ones who was infected? We don't know because obviously the club won't, divulge that kind of medical information to us. But before COVID, before this COVID outbreak at the club, it's certainly been, obvious that he's not on Bruce's radar. And I find that strange because he's young, he gets stuck in, he's effervescent, he knows where the goal is. Many people say that he's the better Longstaff of the two, those who've watched him come through the ranks. I just find it strange that he's not getting that opportunity. Sean Longstaff, as I've said already, for me, I personally felt when Man United came in for him that we should have sold him. I think £20 million for a young player who's unproven, who'd only played 6 or 7 games, some of those substitute appearances for Newcastle at that time. I think that would have been a good sell. But you live and die by those decisions as a football manager and as a club owner. Mike Ashley would have just had more pressure piled on him by selling him. It looked good to keep a hold of him, but who knows? He could go to another club and he could be coached differently, and he could end up being the next Michael Carrick. But at this moment in time, he's not doing himself any favours. He's certainly not worth 20 million at the moment, the way that he's playing, these performances that he's putting in. But maybe he's just low in confidence. Maybe he's not fitting into the pattern of play that Steve Bruce is trying to tell him to play. A lot of it comes down to that. We hear the phrase being Bruced, and it's bandied around quite a bit. We've all used it, I'm sure, at some point. Maybe that's happened with him. We've seen it with Shaw. Shaw was a great player under Rafa, but under Steve Bruce, just hasn't looked half as good a player. And that's what happens. Managers come in, they've got different personalities, they've got different ways of doing things. And unfortunately, somebody who got on well with Rafa and got in under Rafa and was a guaranteed start under Rafa would find themselves out of the picture and not in the match day squad or desperately trying to feature on the subs bench. It works the other way though. John Joe Shelvey, Rafa wouldn't have him anywhere near the first team. Steve Bruce has given him the captain's armband on more than one occasion and puts him in, as one of his key players, his blue chip brigade, if you like. So it works both ways, and that's what happens when you change managers. But we're not going to be changing managers anytime soon. I think we've just seen Bilic, and I always feel sorry for Bilic because he's such a nice guy, but we've just seen him finished after getting a fantastic result. It has to be seen at Man City, 1-1 draw down there. But they'd already made their mind up that we're going to get rid of him and bring in Sam Allardyce. But you look at it and you think, is that going to happen at Newcastle? Is Bruce going to go? It's not going to happen until this takeover is sorted one way or the other. Then I would say Steve Bruce remains in charge at Newcastle, and there's nothing we can do about that. We just have to give him the support and give the players who played our support, from home.
Yeah. I've always thought in our team that the fullbacks have been a problem. I mean, you've got Yedlin and Mankio and Kraft for the right hand side, and you've got Dummett can play on that left, and then you've got Richie who fills in, and then you've now got the young fella, yeah. I can't think of his name at the minute.
Jamal Lewis.
But,
Jamal Lewis.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, but there doesn't seem to be a constant thing. And I mean, Yedlin, I like Yedlin because he is quick, and his crossing's not very good sometimes, and his defending is sometimes, but he is quick, and he's someone. If you've got quick left backs or right wingers or whatever, he's someone who can keep up. And I think sometimes we're not really blessed in the pace department on the fullbacks.
Comes down to the formation you're playing. I think Lewis is a good acquisition. He's young, he's still learning his trade. He's come off the back of a relegation with Norwich, and he's not in a team that's gelled 100% yet at Newcastle. But I'm hopeful that Lewis will progress and do quite well in a black and white shirt. I think he's a kind of player that would benefit massively from being coached by somebody like Rafa. But that's not the position we're in. We've got Steve Bruce at the club, and he seems to have faith in him. I'm a big fan of Paul Dummett. I think Dummett's a great player. He's a local lad. I think a lot of people would see Dummett as probably one of the best defenders we've got. He could play centre half very easily, but he can also play left. He could play right. He could play across the back four. Dummett's like a Mr. Versatility. And yeah, he's not great going forward, but he's a defender. He likes to get in there and do the job. And if you wanted to tighten up and do stuff, Dummett's the ideal player to bring on. Last night's game, prime example. 2-2. We should be happy with a point down at Elland Road the way that they're playing, banging in goals. Bring Paul Dummett on, stick him in the back. You're not gonna have any worries in there. He could have done the job last night. He man-to-man mark. Whatever you want him to do, he can do it. But he's the ultimate professional, and he put the ball in Rowe's head. So from my perspective, I agree with you. Manquillo is probably my favourite at right back. I do like Manquillo at right back. I like to play a flat back four. I do think that Kieran Clark's probably one of my favourite centre halves, and then you could probably play anybody alongside Kieran Clark and you'll do okay. Fernandez and Clark, generally is a good pairing, but I think they got massively let down at Leeds by the midfield. I think Sean Longstaff had lost the plot last night, and you saw Kieran Clark standing with his hands on his hips, just looking at the centre midfield, going, "Well, what on earth are we doing in there?" It was just completely clueless. But normally they do okay, and I think I made this point when we did our commentary last night. But I do feel that a lot of the team, look, we don't know what goes on at coaching. We can only guess. We can look at Bruce's record at other clubs, but we can only guess and assume that that there doesn't seem to be a great deal of knowledge, doesn't seem to be a great deal of coaching. But I get a feeling that the players, if they want to play for Bruce, they will, and they know what they're doing. And a lot of these players played for Rafa. They know what they're doing to defend. They know how to, they're drilled, if you like, in the Rafa Benitez school of defending. And I think a lot of them carry that into the game still to this day. And they have to, because they've got a lack of guidance. But yeah, pace, like you said, Dom, not a great deal of pace in the full-back area at all. Yedlin obviously is the exception, but again, not somebody who has had much luck, in getting into the squad or into the team. So for me, Manquillo, I would play Manquillo, and I would stick with Lewis, because it's clear Dummett's not going to get an opportunity. But I do like Dummett. I think he's probably one of the best defenders at the club.
Yeah. Coming on to COVID and the injuries at the moment, there's not a lot to come out of the club in means of letting us know what's going on, or but that's their prerogative. But we've looked at people like Maximan and the likes, maybe having COVID, or they just has he had Barney with Bruce, or do we even know?
Yeah, I mean, the rumours that we heard were that St Maximin was booked onto the plane to travel to Palace, and he was on that flight and then didn't get on. Did he not get on because he's got COVID? Did he not get on because he's had a fallout with Bruce? A lot of allegations, a lot of speculation. Bruce had a mark under his eye. People assuming that there's been some kind of fight. None of it's proven. None of us know. But there is stories coming out, and I always say with that, Dom, that there is no smoke without fire. Whenever there's a story that comes out, it comes out for a reason. It doesn't get made up by a journalist just to try and get a couple of column inches. There is something coming out of the dressing room by a player, or it comes out via their agent, and it's done for a reason. Look, there's no doubt St Maximin wasn't the player that we tied down to a new contract. He was suffering. He's been carrying a lot of knocks, I think, and that carries on from last season. He's the one player that the opposition target to kick him up a height, and you can't, your body and legs can't keep taking that kind of punishment without long term damage. And from his perspective, I just think that he's been tired leading into some of these games, and just hasn't been putting the effort in, hasn't been putting the best in that he can. He's even come out on his own social media channel and said that that he hasn't been able to put in the best effort. But bit of radio silence. He's back on Twitter again, but we'll never know. As I said, Steve Bruce is old school. I get the impression that what happens in the dressing room will stay in the dressing room, and they'll keep it very much in house. But it wouldn't surprise me if something's happened there with a COVID outbreak at the club. We have to thank our lucky stars that it's not as bad as Sunderland. Obviously, they've now got the next 3 games they're going to miss because of COVID. They've had to put in an application because I think it was over 9 players and coaching staff had it, or 9 players had it plus the coaching staff. But we haven't gone down that road, so hopefully we won't go down that particular avenue. But yeah, I did find it strange at first that the club hadn't come out and said who it was. But then, when I looked at it, I thought, well, it's probably down to the fact that they can't divulge medical information. You can't just say, well, such and such has got COVID, such and such has got this. You don't usually get that kind of information anyway. But because we're living in these strange times, I think a lot of us expected to be told, well, this is who's got it and this is how long they're out. But maybe it's you've got to take in the families into consideration as well. They've got kids at home. They don't want to hear that their dad's got COVID on Sky Sports News, and then they start worrying at home. So there's loads of little things that you've got to bear in mind. So yeah, I think we're all wondering why the club hadn't come out, but fair play. That's probably the reason why, Dom.
Yep. Just coming on to the return of fans to stadiums. This is a strange one because I find it's unfair on some clubs, and also it's having 1,000, 2,000. It's not worth it because you're having to pay staff and for the day, and it's probably going to cost you more money than it's going to pay for the bills and all that, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's given some teams an unfair advantage as well, to be perfectly honest. I mean, from my perspective, I look at it and go, 2,000 fans at Liverpool, all standing on the Kop, all behind the goal, certainly made a big difference in some of the games, and it gives them an incentive. They're playing for a crowd, and it can make a big difference, I think. Do I agree with fans going back into grounds? No, but then there's a lot of things I don't agree with that man that you've just shown on the screen, Boris Johnson. I mean, he's there's nobody's been in this situation in modern times, so I will give him a bit of a buy on that side of things. But in general, it's clear that this isn't going away. It's clear that any big events where there's a mass population of people, then this virus is easily spread. And I think there's been a few occasions where we've been allowed a little bit of freedom, and it's just resulted in, essentially the R rate rising in various areas, and we're going to see it again. You see people in Soho the other night, where London, of course, was in a lower tier, all going out and partying, basically having their Christmas nights, and all in close confinement next to each other, and you're thinking, that is going to knock the R rate up in London considerably over the next month, and they'll go back down into a higher tier. People will travel from London for business because you're allowed to go from place to place for work. Then it spreads it to another area if people are coming from London to Newcastle. So football supporters, going back to lower level clubs. Obviously, I'm heavily involved with Dunstan in the, in the non-league, and for me, having 200 people in those grounds as well, it's a necessity because clubs like that will fold if they're not allowed in. So I'm split really on that kind of debate. Big stadiums, 2,000 people. All of those people have to travel to the ground, whether bus or metro or car or whatever. Then they're all getting in together. I just don't agree with it. Non-league clubs, you need the finance, and as long as you're carrying out all the precautions, standing outside, not going in. Obviously, the bar's closed at these football grounds, but going to the ground, being in your family bubble, standing next to people, wearing a mask, putting your sanitizer on, then I don't see an issue with that. You're outside. It's no different between it's no different to standing watching a football match and going to the park. And going out for a walk and being 200 people in the park, it's exactly the same. So, I think for the non-league clubs, it's a necessity. For the Premier League clubs and the Championship, etc. I just think it's a bit too soon, and I don't expect to go back to St James's Park. I've got to be honest until at least the very earliest August, but I think it'll be nearer September, October before we get back to it. I think it could be at least another 10, 11 months before we see fans returning in numbers to St James's Park.
Yeah, completely agree with you there, Steve. Coming on to this fella in the Premier League. So, the Premier League have acted acted disrespectfully towards our takeover, and obviously Mike Ashley wants his money now. But what can you say about this takeover? It's just been one farce after another.
Yeah, and I mean we're going to see obviously something different again because the Premier League just signed a deal as we came on air with BN Sports for TV coverage now. So where does that put the Saudis? It's going to be very interesting to see how all of that progresses and how it changes things and changes the landscape. Richard Masters is obviously the villain of the piece because he's the face of the Premier League as far as we are concerned. There's been a lot of to and fro over the last 6 months. We don't seem to have got anywhere. Seems to have gone very quiet over the last couple of weeks after a lot of activity. But it's in the hands of lawyers and solicitors. Nick DeMarco is clearly, doing his thing, and the Newcastle Fans Consortium are also doing their thing. So I guess we just have to wait and see how things pan out. I've told your viewers who watch NUFC Matters on more than one occasion that I'm still 100% positive that it will go through at some point. Yeah. We can't put dates and times on it, but I do speak to people on both sides. I speak to people within the football club and I speak to people within the buyer's side. And from my perspective, both parties are willing to get this deal across the line by hook or by crook, and every single stone will be overturned to get to that aim. And from my perspective, I look at it and go, good on them, because it's clear that Amanda Staveley and her husband and the Rubens and PIF wanted to buy the club, and it's clear that Mike Ashley wanted to sell the club. So it's a simple case of trying to find a way of doing it, and if we can do it and do it well, then great stuff. But at the moment, the Premier League are against it. Richard Masters, as I say, he is the villain of the piece as far as we're concerned. But I think there's a few other villains who are sitting in the background who could be exposed. It's got to be said, Dom. They could be exposed for what they've done. I think the big thing is that there is a lot of dirty laundry which could be aired in public, and I think that the Premier League will probably not want that to happen. And essentially you could end up in a situation where the deal gets pushed through in a different way. But let's see what happens. I don't expect anything to happen before Christmas. I think the new year will see Newcastle United with a new owner. When is that? How's it going to happen? I really don't know, but the positivity is still there on both sides, and the determination to get a deal done is still there on both sides. So let's see what happens. And if the worst case scenario did happen and we got stuck with Mike Ashley again, he's not going to be happy. He's not going to be happy at all. But there'll always be somebody, I think, who'll want to buy the football club. I do think, from Mike Ashley's point of view, though, he could have potentially gone and had discussions with other people, but he's stuck with PIF, Amanda, and the Rubens because it's a deal that suits him. Can't say much more than that, can we? Really, it's that in itself's got to be positive. That we know Mike Ashley still wants to sell, but at this moment in time, we've got an owner in a pandemic who, we know is very rich, although he's not as rich as the likes of Abramovich, etc. But he's somebody who will maintain the club at least and not let it go under because he wants to sell it. So, there'll be clubs. There's a lot of clubs in a worse position than Newcastle United at the minute. We've just got to hang tight and hang fire. And at the moment, we can't go to the match anyway. We've just got to sit back and wait and see what happens. But let's hope by the time we go back into the ground in September, October 2021, if that's the case, that we have new owners and we can give the new owners a proper welcome, a proper St James's Park welcome.
Yep, that sounds brilliant to me. January window coming up. I was watching your show with Liam on Tuesday. Came across Josh King from Bournemouth. He's out of contract at the end of the season. Is he a player that you would welcome to the club?
Yeah, I would take Josh King tomorrow. I think we all agree that we needed another striker as well as Callum Wilson because the options if Callum Wilson gets injured are not very good at all. We have Andy Carroll, who was nothing more than a publicity signing when he came into the club, who struggles to maintain fitness at the best of times, but hasn't scored probably in a calendar year now since he came back to the football club. I know he hasn't played in as many games as others, but he still had ample opportunities to score and hasn't done it. So was that a good signing? You tell me. I'm sure we didn't sell as many replica shirts as you would do if we'd signed somebody with a bit more more about him, like Salomon Rondon. But yeah, I would take Josh King. Joe Linton, I think we've already discussed him on the show, but he's clearly not a number 9. He's clearly not a striker. He'll get you the odd goal, and not a bad hold-up player at this moment in time, and is thinking, using his brain a little bit more and being a bit more creative. But would Joe Linton be in my starting lineup? No, he wouldn't. Josh King, yeah. Look, he's played with Callum Wilson, played with Ryan Fraser, knows how those guys work, and it's another option. Play the two of them up front together. Definitely not. You wouldn't. You couldn't go far wrong. It would remind me of potentially having the likes of Demba Ba and Cisse again. That's probably the last time we had a prolific duo like that. There's been many over the years. Beardsley Cole, Kelly Peacock, Quinn McGee. The list is endless. But it'd be nice to have two forwards who you could rely on because Callum Wilson will go through a little bit of a drought. All centre forwards do go through them, and if your partner in crime up front is still banging the goals in, then you don't have anything to worry about. And as we've seen with other teams, you get Leeds last night. I think it was 5 different scorers for Leeds last night. You need goal scorers. And you've got goal scorers in your team, you'll always do well. So yeah, I would take Josh King tomorrow. Troy Deeney, of course, was mentioned. I know Nathan, who does our shows, was often going on about Troy Deeney. Said we should have tried to get him. I always felt wages would probably be a bit difficult for him, and his stats are full of penalties. Not that that's a bad thing. A lot of Alan Shearer's goals were penalties, but I just felt Troy Deeney, as opposed to Callum Wilson, I think we got the right one. Would I take a Armstrong back from Blackburn? Is he worth a gamble? He's been mentioned. People say we should get Ivan Toney back. I don't think Ivan Toney's Premier League. Armstrong, again, great Championship player. Is he Premier League class? He wasn't when we had him. I still don't regret letting him go. Good player, great lad, but I genuinely don't. I don't really worry about Armstrong. I don't think we let another Alan Shearer go. After that, you're struggling really. January's a bad month to bring in players. I think the key really, if we can get Josh King, fantastic. But is a creative midfield player, like I said before. We need somebody in the middle who can pull the strings and set up the chances for Callum Wilson. That player might be within the squad. You know, it could be Matt Ritchie. It could be Ryan Fraser. You know, if they're willing to play in that position. And it just comes down to sitting down with the players and asking them and saying, look, you know, do us a favour. And I know we've got other midfielders there who, you know, we've got a multitude of midfielders who all do the same job. Spoilers, tacklers, but they're not creative enough. And, you know, that's the issue. So a creative midfield player would be the priority for me. Second, another striker. Somebody who can put the ball in the back of the net, because your biggest worry is Callum Wilson getting injured.
Yeah. I wrote down a few others. Danny Rose, Ryan Bertrand, Mustafi from Arsenal, Lundestram from Sheffield United, and Willems.
Yeah, I would take Willems. I'd take Willems back tomorrow. I think most people would. The guy gets Newcastle. He became a fan's favourite in a short space of time. Knows where the back of the net is an attacking player. And yeah, I would take Willems back tomorrow. Danny Rose, no thank you, not at all. Wouldn't take him at all. The other names you mentioned, none of them really stand out. You know, I wouldn't. For me, anyway, personally, I wouldn't take them. Is to say centre midfield players who are a bit creative are very difficult to come by as well. People who can ping a pass and do well. I think the answer to that conundrum, that midfield conundrum, is within the squad. I think that's maybe is why Josh King is and forwards tend to be mentioned. We could look across the continent, but do you trust the scouting team who paid 40 million for who discovered Joe Linton and then we decided to pay 40 million for him? I don't think I do. Like I'd rather wait until we until we get an owner in who knows what they're doing on that score. But look, I just think we'll get a million names between now and the end of January linked with Newcastle. But as we know, it's usually the ones that we don't hear about that get done. Am I worried about anybody leaving, or do I think anybody should go? I'd like to keep a hold of Dwight Gale. Dwight Gale knows where the back of the net is, and for me, until the end of the season, at the very least, I would keep a hold of him. I don't think we'll tie him down on a new contract. I don't think that'll be even in their minds. Other than that, I would just keep it as it is until the end of the season, and then see if the takeover is any further forward, and if it's not, we know where we are, and we can then start looking at how things are going to progress. But I don't think Mike Ashley will be looking to spend a fortune in January. He's just lost a lot of money on the high street, so I don't think it's going to be high on the agenda.
Yeah. Coming up there to finishing off, what we'll do is I just wanted to put out, sorry to hear about Martin, who passed away recently. Terrible thing to hear about. So people reached out, and unfortunately, I don't know whether he got the messages or anything. So really bad, and rest in peace.
It's awful, Dom. It's awful, Dom.
Yeah, and George Taylor, who used to be the club liaison officer, who had been there for more than 20 years, at the age of 94. So, it's not great at this time of year for deaths, is it?
No, it's been a horrible year, full stop. George Taylor was a great guy. I used to see George every day in Newcastle. We used to drink in the same coffee shop and often talk to George on a regular basis. Lovely guy. Used to look after the car park. He was still making sure that the players got their cars parked in the right position, etc. But of course, he used to do Shoot on ITV. Those of you of a certain age will remember Shoot. George used to present that. So rest in peace to George. And Martin. Tragic situation. For me, to see somebody like him, a Newcastle fan reach out, to the masses, put a cry for help out like that. He was found. It was led to believe, I'm led to believe by people who know him better than I did, was that he was okay. But then we heard the shocking news a couple of nights later that he'd passed away. So, thoughts with his family. And Neil Robson, of course, another one who we lost. Good friend of mine, somebody who I went to a lot of away games with, spent a lot of time in the early days when we used to do the talk-ins at Fluid Bar in Newcastle. He used to come up with good pal of mine, Kev, and that. And we had some great times with Neil, and always a laugh. Good Newcastle fan. Sadly, he passed away as well, and he had health issues, not COVID, I'm pleased to say, but sadly, he passed away as well. So rest in peace to him as well, and thoughts with his family.
Yep. Just going to come on to We Are the Geordies, which is nicely placed behind you. Did give it a watch. It was great. I've watched it 3 or 4 times now. Really did enjoy. Um, what was your take on everything? I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I loved it, mate. I mean, to be honest, Zara asked for my help at the outset of it, and I said, yeah, I'm more than happy to help. But all I did was really pull in some of the ex-players for her, and just get her some, any numbers she needed that I had, I would pass on, and it was nice to see, nice of her to give us a credit in it. Executive producer is a nice title to have. I'm involved in films and acting as well, so it's always nice to get an extra credit on things. But yeah, look, it was great. I think we discovered something in this film which is even more apparent now, is how important supporters are for football. And I think sitting watching the Rafa Benitez song getting chanted out, and seeing people walking up to the ground on the documentary, and hearing the passion of George Mitchell, who does our retro show, just made it such a poignant time for the film to come out. And of course the film was supposed to be out straight after the promotion season, so different things have delayed it, and it couldn't have come out at a better time. And I think a lot of people who watch it will really, really, really enjoy it. It's it's a lovely production. Zara and James have done a fantastic job. They're very professional at what they do. And anybody who hasn't seen it, get yourself onto your streaming services or go to the website wearethegeordies.com and get one for Christmas.
Yep. Right. Coming on to your documentary, mate. The with the trolls. Do you want to give that a plug, and when you can watch it?
It's done. We're just waiting for confirmation from Frank Turner's agent that we can use his song, which basically Neil Jackson and I put it together. Neil really wanted to get this song in. It's very poignant. We're not going to monetize the video. It's going to be advert free. We want the message to get out there as much as possible. And we also think that with Frank Turner's song on it, of course, that it'll get wider spread, because Frank, we hope, will tweet it. So from our perspective, there's a slight delay on that. We're not sure how long it's going to take. The application's been in for a week now, and we are in regular communication. It's just something that has to be given the okay. Then they will take the copyright off the music, and it'll be used. So, but the documentary's great. We have a couple of people involved who have been quite prolific, shall we say, on Twitter. Ian Hannon and Ben Johnson, Geordie Ladd and Burnsy, to those of you on Twitter. And they were kind enough to come and sit down with me, and in a socially distanced environment, and be interviewed about trolling and being trolled. And we then put them together, and they've never met. So that in itself, it's a very social experiment. But there's some great interviews on there. I interviewed a lot of the interviews are done on Zoom. We interviewed Sav, obviously off a Monday show. She talks about her experiences as a Newcastle fan on Twitter. We speak to a guy from Scunthorpe who is somebody who runs a mental health charity, who's suffered some horrific trolling over the years, to the point where he nearly took his own life. We speak to a school teacher from Sheffield who is a Newcastle fan, but who tells us about how it affects the younger generation, and what happens in their lives on social media. And we also speak to Ian Mearns, the MP, about how the far right and other political activists can utilise social media and utilise trolls to try and change people's views on politics, etc. So it's a fascinating documentary. Its running time is 2 hours. We didn't realise we'd done that much, but yeah, we felt that the meeting between Ian and Burnsy couldn't have been edited. It's such a compelling watch. But yeah, we just wanted to link it up with our Think Before You Tweet campaign, and I'm really proud of it. It's something we've done on zero budget, something we've done in lockdown, but something that we wanted to do. And look, trolls don't bother me. They think they do. They think that they're getting at me. They think they're getting me down. But I've had them for years, and I've had critics for years, and I'll continue to do what I'm doing until the day I die. So unfortunately for them, they're wasting their time making all these accounts and putting stuff up and trying to say that they've got this and that on me, because, to be honest, I live my life in the public spotlight locally to start with anyway. The skeletons in my cupboard are all out there to see, and from my perspective, let them try their best, but unfortunately they don't bother me, Dom. And I would advise other people, if you find yourself being trolled or affected by trolls, block them. Just block them. Move on. These people are irrelevant. You know what I mean? You don't need these kind of people in your lives, and don't let them get you down. And if you feel as if you are being affected by them, report, and keep reporting these accounts, and eventually they do take them down.
Yep. Right, Steve, thanks for coming on. I'm going to play your Think Before You Tweet video as well at the end. But thanks for coming on, and it's been a pleasure.
I just want to say, Dom, well done, mate. Listen, it's hard to do these shows. We started ours off in March. I've got a lot of experience doing TV and interviews. As you know, I've done them for many, many years. But I just want to say, Dom, to you and your good lady, well done, mate. You're doing a cracking job, and don't let anybody say otherwise. And keep cracking on. Don't concentrate on the negatives. Concentrate on the positives, mate. You're doing a great show, great service for people during this horrendous time. And thanks very much for having us on, mate.
No problem, mate. Thanks very much.
Think before you tweet.
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 Please just think before you tweet.
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 Think before you tweet.